With U.S. elections only 2 months away and Donald Trump promising that if he is elected, he will get rid of EV tax credits, it's time to talk about the effects that Trump getting rid of these credits could have on Tesla, on the other American auto manufacturers, and on Chinese auto manufacturers. So let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. So first of all, this is part 2 of a 2-part experiment. In the first part, I mentioned Harris and Waltz a whole bunch of times in a video. It's the last one I did, so you can check it out up here if you're interested. In this one, I'm going to mention Donald Trump a bunch of times, and actually the story is about him anyway, so it makes perfect sense to talk about that in this context. But first, the results from the other video. It performs completely middle of the road. It's number 4 out of 10, so just about the middle of the pack in terms of the last 10 videos. It got 8.8% click-through rate, which is pretty standard for me. So basically, I saw no push in terms of views and no degradation of views. It was just a middle of the road video. So that's what I have. That's only one data point, of course, but I found that there was absolutely no bump by mentioning them. So we're going to see what happens when I mention Donald Trump a bunch of times in this video, and we'll see if it gets pushed up or it gets suppressed or it just stays in the middle of the pack as well. So anyway, let's go ahead and read a couple of articles, and then I want to talk about my thoughts about what Trump getting rid of the EV tax credit and potentially allowing Chinese car manufacturers to manufacture within the United States, what sort of effects that could have on the US auto market. And I think they could be pretty substantial. Anyway, I'll start with this Reuters article from August 20th. Trump says he may end EV tax credit, is open to naming Elon Musk as an advisor. That part is interesting, but not really the point of this video. So for now, at least, I'll skip that stuff and just focus on the EV part of it. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump said on Monday that if elected, he would consider, so this is a little bit of a back off, by the way. Before, he was much more adamant about this, but he said he would consider ending a $7,500 tax credit for EV purchases, and that he would be open to naming Tesla CEO, actually Techno King, Elon Musk, to a cabinet or advisory role. It's interesting that these articles never actually call him by his proper title. CEO is a made-up title also, so it makes no more sense to call him CEO than call him Techno King. But anyway, continuing on with the article, tax credits and tax incentives are not generally a very good thing, Trump told Reuters in an interview after a campaign event. Skipping ahead a bit, if elected, Trump could take steps to reverse Treasury Department rules that have made it easier for automakers to take advantage of the $7,500 tax credit, or could ask the US Congress to repeal it entirely. And this is a very important point, by the way. The president is the executive branch. They execute things. The legislature, Congress, is who makes the laws. So Trump, I don't think, can actually just single-handedly get rid of this credit. So anyway, it's more complex than him just waving a magic wand and making it go away. Anyhow, continuing on, while president, Trump sought to repeal the EV tax credit, which was later expanded by President Joe Biden in 2022. I'm not making any final decisions on it, Trump said of the EV tax credit, which again is interesting because I'm going to look at a July 20th article in which he seemed much more definite about this. I'm a big fan of electric cars, but I'm a fan of gasoline-propelled cars and also hybrids and whatever else happens to come along. So that's really not taking much of a stance, I guess I have to say. He added he would rescind the Biden administration rules that will prod automakers to build more EVs and plug-in hybrids to meet stricter emission standards, and said he sees a much smaller market for EVs because of cost and battery range issues. And then finishing up the relevant part of this article, Trump also said on Monday he would take steps to discourage exports of vehicles produced by the Detroit 3 automakers and others from Mexico for U.S. consumers by imposing new tariffs, and would prevent Chinese automakers from building new plants in Mexico for U.S. market vehicles. He made similar threats during his presidency. If you put tariffs on those cars, they're going to make it here. I believe he means building the cars in the US. It's very simple. It's not complicated. If you tell Mexico, look, you're stealing our car industry, which they're doing now. But Trump is open to Chinese and other automakers building vehicles in the United States. We're going to give incentives, and if China and other countries want to come here and sell the cars, they're going to build plants here and they're going to hire our workers, Trump said. We will make our own cars. I want to make our own cars. So again, real quick, the reality check is that NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, basically says that things that are made in Mexico and Canada come into the US without tariffs. So it's unclear how this would actually get implemented, but anyway, this is what Trump said. So turning from the Reuters article to a MarketWatch article that is about a month older than that, from July 20th, how a Trump presidency could, quote, rock the EV market and bring Tesla prices way down. The entry of Chinese automakers to the US could bring massive price pressures to EVs, one expert says. Again, I'll just read parts of this article. If you want to read the whole thing, it's in the description, of course, as per usual. In his speech at the Republican National Convention on Thursday night, Trump expressed openness to Chinese auto manufacturers moving production to the United States from Mexico, which he said would create domestic auto jobs. Trump also threatened to levy tariffs on Mexican auto imports to impede the sale of foreign-made cars to U.S. drivers. Plants will be built in the United States, and our people are going to man those plants, Trump said. If they don't agree with us, we'll put a tariff of approximately 100 to 200% on each car, and they will be unsellable in the United States. Skipping down a little, I can be persuasive, Musk said at a recent shareholder meeting. I think a lot of his friends now have Teslas, and they all love it. He's a huge fan of the Cybertruck, so I think those might be contributing factors, yeah. The potential entry of Chinese automakers to the U.S. would, quote, bring massive price pressures to EVs and break the lower price point EV market wide open from a supply perspective, Pat Ryan, founder and CEO of the car shopping app Copilot, told MarketWatch. As electric vehicles' share of new car sales in the U.S. grew to 8% this year from 7.2% a year ago, Tesla's market share declined to less than 50% last quarter, according to Cox Automotive. And speaking of price pressures, already EV prices, including for Teslas, have declined significantly over the last 2 years due to a supply glut and slowing demand. Musk, noting that many people live paycheck to paycheck, has reiterated the need to solve the fundamental affordability question as the company reduced prices. And the next paragraph hits kind of close to home. That may still not be low enough for some buyers as interest rates remain high and many people remain under heavy financial pressure. Both of those things are true. The typical American household can only afford a $400 monthly car payment or roughly a 60-month loan of $20,000 at current interest rates based on household incomes and budgeting standards to spend less than 10% of take-home pay on car payments. Rising auto prices have moved up the average monthly payment to a much higher $756, according to June data from Cox Automotive, and I will just say we are paying about $650 for our Model 3 and I think $743 a month for our Model Y. So we are right in that target and paying way more than $400 a month for our car payments. While European and American brands do sell a few models in the US that are built in China, there are significant barriers, mainly a 27.5% tariff on Chinese-made cars, according to Consumer Reports, which cited bipartisan efforts to ban the import of Chinese-made vehicles altogether. If Chinese automakers manufacture in the US, it could potentially rock the market and make EVs very cost competitive, Copilot's Ryan said. That being said, those made in the US are unlikely to be at the $25,000 price point. That would be affordable for many consumers. As Trump introduced the idea of Chinese auto production in the U.S., he also criticized the Biden administration's investment in electric vehicle infrastructure, which includes $7.5 billion set aside to build more EV chargers. Trump, if elected, is expected to end federal tax incentives for EV buyers, while his running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, supports rebates for gas vehicles instead. I've got to say, rebates for gas vehicles instead is quite the curveball, isn't it? All right, so those are a couple of recent articles. What are my thoughts on all this? The first thing is that getting rid of these incentives and everything and getting rid of the Inflation Reduction Act and all of that kind of stuff is going to be, like I said, a little more difficult. Trump can't just wave his magic wand and make this stuff go away. He could potentially try to do some executive orders and such, but really it's up to the legislature. So it doesn't just depend on whether Trump is elected, but also who else gets elected in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. Of course, if Republicans control both houses plus the presidency, then yeah, he'll probably be able to do whatever he wants. But otherwise, it's not going to be so easy. But let's just say that it happens, right? So what if the Inflation Reduction Act, if the $7,500 tax credit plus the $3,000 per car, I think it's $3,000 or maybe $4,000 per car, that the auto manufacturers also get for manufacturing electric vehicles, let's say that goes away, and also Chinese automakers are welcomed into the United States. Remember, the Japanese automakers and actually, even German automakers like BMW, they have plants in the United States as well. So this is not an unprecedented thing at all. So first things first, what if the $7,500 tax credit goes away? Well, that is going to hurt a lot of car manufacturers. I think, even though Elon Musk said it will hurt his rivals more than it will hurt Tesla, I think for the number of electric vehicles sold and the ones that actually have access to the tax credit, I think in the short term, it's going to hurt Tesla a lot, much more than the big three automakers or Volkswagen or Toyota or Honda or whatever, the so-called legacy automakers. And of course, it's going to hurt Rivian really, really badly because they're manufacturing the R2 to be cheap enough to get the tax credit. And if they lose that tax credit, that means that the vehicles are going to be effectively $7,500 more expensive. So in the short term, electric vehicle sales would be gutted. We've already seen this happen in Germany. We saw electric vehicle sales when they got rid of all the rebates and everything. I think it was in January of this year that you saw sales just drop off a cliff, right? So there was a huge push at the end of 2023 of people who wanted to buy buy electric vehicles, buying before the tax rebates and things like that. The tax incentives went away in Germany, and then there was a huge drop-off in electric vehicle sales in Germany. It seems kind of bizarre to me that these countries just get rid of these tax incentives entirely. Seems like what they would do is they would phase them out. So every year, like maybe $1,000 less or something, so that they would go away slowly, so you wouldn't get this kind of crazy boom and bust cycle with anything really, but electric vehicles in particular in this case. So anyway, my prediction is you would see a lot of people purchasing right up to the point where it ended. Let's say it ended at the end of 2025 and the start of 2026, you didn't see them. You would have a huge glut of sales at the end of 2025, and then it would drop off a cliff in 2026. And that would, in the short term, really, really hurt companies like Tesla and Rivian and even other auto manufacturers, the legacy auto manufacturers that make a lot of electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids. It would hurt all of them in terms of sales. But of course, if we're looking at 2026, I think that Tesla is already planning to have, their alternate strategy in place by then, which is to have their autonomous vehicles, their full self-driving, be available to be able to serve rides to people, at least in some cities in the US, and to begin rolling it out en masse in 2026. So I think they will be somewhat protected from this. And of course, in the long term, people will eventually buy electric vehicles again, but it will really put a slowdown on the number of EVs that are sold in the United States. So the knock-on effects of this is that you will see legacy auto manufacturers really, really reduce their ramp of electric vehicles. Companies like Tesla and Rivian that are all in on EVs are just going to be stuck manufacturing EVs and trying to sell them as best as they can through this time period. But you will see most legacy auto manufacturers really reduce the number of electric vehicles that they sell, especially if EPA milestones like reducing the amount of fleet emissions and everything goes down as well. We will really, really see them backpedal on producing a lot of EVs. And while that might help out these companies in the short term in terms of their profit, it is going to be devastating in the long term, because we haven't really talked about China yet. China is in the middle of changing the game almost literally right now. Internal to China, they are selling just about 50% plug-in vehicles right now. So that is half their market. They are the largest auto market in the world, selling 1/3 of all new vehicles right now, and half of those vehicles are plug-in vehicles. So that means that 1/6 of all vehicles sold in the world, specifically in China, of course it's more because they're sold in other places, but 1/6 is electric vehicles, and that number is only going up. So China is going all electric as fast as they possibly can. Within 1 to 2 years, we're going to see 80+% of Chinese auto sales being electric, and that means that the manufacturers are going to be making electric vehicles rather than gas vehicles. They're going to be selling them into the European market. In fact, they already are. They're selling them into other markets like Thailand, Indonesia, Australia, Mexico, Latin America, etc. They're already selling pretty big time into those areas. So they're making a big push, which means that these areas are going electric very, very quickly. And so you can see what's going to happen is if legacy auto manufacturers in the United States, in Europe, and in Japan, who are making and selling cars in the US, don't change over to electric vehicles as fast as they can, they're going to be irrelevant in another couple of years. And the US will become something of an island of manufacturing gas cars when the rest of the world is moving away from that really, really quickly. But oh wait, there's more, because Donald Trump said in his speech, and he has reiterated many times, that he's considering allowing Chinese auto manufacturers to manufacture cars in the United States without tariffs. And so what that means is that they will almost certainly set up shop in non-union states like the South, like where I am. South Carolina is a good one, Georgia is a good one, Texas is a good one, etc., etc. They are going to make electric vehicles. They're not going to make gas vehicles because their specialty is electric vehicles. They know how to do it at scale. They know how to do it cheaply. Of course, it won't be as cheap as in China. You're not going to get a $16,000 vehicle in the US, but you could get that same vehicle for on the order of $25,000, and that looks pretty darn good compared to like a Camry or your basic gas car, which means that if they come into the US at the same time that you're going to see legacy auto manufacturers cut back on their transition to electric vehicles in order to maintain profits and things like that in gas cars, because those are being supported in the US, you're going to see Chinese manufacturers move into the United States, and without tariffs, they'll be able to sell these electric vehicles at very competitive rates with gas cars. And of course, things are just getting cheaper and cheaper because the batteries are getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So these cars are not only going to be cost competitive, but pretty soon, by the time these factories get built in 2 or 3 years, they'll probably already be cheaper than gas cars, just sticker price to sticker price with no incentive required. And once consumers see that, they're going to go like, wait, this car costs less to buy, costs less to operate, and lasts longer than these other cars. Well, why would I buy a gas car? And that means that legacy auto manufacturers are going to be SOL at that point. As Pat Ryan said in the Market Watch article, it's going to rock the industry. And essentially what we're going to get is a little bubble of a couple of years of legacy autos selling gas cars and looking really good in the US market, while the rest of the world transitions to electric vehicles. And the US will be its own little island, but then China's going to come in and produce electric vehicles, again, if they don't have tariffs, if they build it in the United States. And those Chinese factories will pop that bubble really, really fast, and legacy auto manufacturers will go out of business. So what will probably happen is we will see the big three auto manufacturers, plus a lot of European auto manufacturers, and of course Japanese auto manufacturers as well. Those companies are going to fade away very, very rapidly. And by 2028 or so, we'll see China snapping up old factories from legacy auto manufacturers at pennies on the dollar. So in the short term, getting rid of these $7,500 tax credit will really, really hurt Tesla. But in the long term, it will prove devastating for the rest of the auto manufacturing market in the United States. All right, so that's my opinion on Donald Trump getting rid of the US EV tax credit. Let me know in the comments what you think. Agree, disagree, just be polite about it. And in a few days, I'll report back on this video and tell you how it did compared to my last videos, whether it did better than the other one, whether it did worse, whether it did the same, whether there was no difference. Again, I'm only able to provide single data points, but I think it is interesting to do these experiments. And don't forget that Friday and Saturday, just a couple of days from now, I'm going to be in Vancouver at the Everything Electric show. I will be doing a couple of panels and I will be around. One of the panels is actually with Sandy Monroe. So definitely check out the panels, come say hi. And in the meantime, I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.